Welcome everyone, it's the Crypto Lark. Very excited today to be joined by JP from Thorchain. JP, how's it going?
Good, good. Thanks for dialing in this morning with me.
Absolutely. Now we're going to be breaking down just what Thorchain is, and they're actually doing an initial DEX offering on the Binance chain. So we're going to be exploring that and a whole lot of other exciting things. Now, just a reminder, as always, guys, to make sure to DYOR on any project. There are some links down below to the website and to the Telegram community where you can go and find more information about what Thorchain is doing. Also, a massive thank you to the team over at Thorchain for supporting the channel by sponsoring today's video. So, let's get into it. Let's start off with the elevator pitch. Give us the high level. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, Thorchain can be described as essentially Uniswap for all digital assets, and Uniswap is one of Ethereum's most successful DeFi applications, and it allows anyone to, in a permissionless way, to stake their unproductive assets in these liquidity pools in what you can describe as a marketplace of liquidity, so that someone else can come along and with a high time preference and wishing to swap their assets, use the staked assets in order to perform a swap. And the pools themselves are mathematically bonded. So nobody can influence the way that the swap takes place, and the swap is performed over the liquidity that is being staked by the first person. As a result, the person who swapped the assets got the asset that they want with a very low slip, assuming there's deep liquidity, and the person who staked the assets got a small fee on that trade. And you can think about it as it's a marketplace of liquidity. It's bringing low time preference asset holders together with high time preference asset swappers, putting them together in a permissionless way. And it is being built to connect all blockchains: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, etc. And we can discuss how that will work. But essentially, the team see that Thorchain will bring together these blockchains in a marketplace of liquidity. And it doesn't matter what the asset is, it will allow people to stake it in these pools. And actually, like I said, earn interest away from these pools, which is actually really cool because a lot of the assets we hold are unproductive. They don't do anything for us. They're just in our wallets. So if we can take these assets, and you and I were probably really low time preference, so we've got assets held away and we're not going to touch for years. But wouldn't it be good if we can move these assets, put them in these permissionless, non-custodial pools, and have other people trade over the top of that? So that's what it's about.
That's pretty cool. And multi-chain liquidity, it's this really important thing. You look across the exchange space, right? And there's a lot of low liquidity in a lot of places, which means that a lot of the business kind of always floats up to the top exchanges, and some trading pairs just have terribly low liquidity. Maybe got holders, whatever it might be. But also, I really love this idea of being able to sort of earn on your long-term holdings, because somebody actually asked me the question today, like, well, you know, you don't get any percentages on holding your Bitcoin. I said, well, no, it's kind of like putting your money under your bed. It just sits there, and that's okay because it's Bitcoin, but there's actually ways that you can earn interest on that. So in terms of maybe who can be a liquidity provider, like, do I have to have like, 100 Bitcoin to be able to come in and provide liquidity? Or if I have like $1,000 in Bitcoin, can I come and be a liquidity provider?
Yeah, the pools are permissionless. Anyone can stake whatever they want, to the smallest amount to the highest amount. And the way the staking works is when you put your assets into a pool, let's say a pool has 100 units of an asset, say Bitcoin paired to the settlement currency. And if you put in 50 of those units, you own 50% of the pool. So 50% of all the earnings will be yours to withdraw later on. If someone comes along, let's say there's 100 units of assets on the other side, and someone comes on and puts in another 100. So now there's a total of 200. That's good for traders now because the liquidity is deeper. The slip on each trade will be less. And the earnings will be a little bit less, but that will encourage higher volume because it'll be a much more liquid marketplace, and swaps can be done for much less in slip. And the original stakers still own the 50%, so the 50 unit share of the pool, which is now 200. So now they own only a quarter of the pool. It's all done at the protocol level. So anyone can come in and stake the smallest unit. It doesn't matter.
And I think it's really important again to just underline that this is non-custodial, right? So you're in control of your private keys at all time here.
Correct. So the assets are moved into on-chain pools. And if you essentially just need to trust the code. So on Bitcoin, you hold your assets behind private keys. And you trust the code that they aren't going to get spent. In the same way, when you move your assets into these pools, there's no one to trust. You're trusting that the protocol is safe, and we'll discuss security. And you're trusting that the code is also safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's as far as the trust relationship goes. But you can withdraw. The only person who can withdraw the assets that were put in is the person who owns the private key to the account that put them in.
And in terms of, I guess, security, so is the code being audited, or has it already been audited by someone?
Yeah, we're working closely. The team's working closely with some heavy hitters in the space, such as Swish Labs out of San Francisco, Interchain Foundation, All in Bits, who are building Cosmos. And so we have access to some really smart minds in the space in order to be able to ensure that the code is safe. We already know that the technology that will power this chain is safe. It's currently securing Binance chain with a $5 billion valuation, and Cosmos, which has Atom token, which over a $1.2 billion valuation. So the code is safe. What we must ensure, and we can discuss this later, is that the tokens must be distributed in a way that nobody has an unfair access to the initial validators. Because the validators will stake in a similar way to Binance Chain and Cosmos Atom. They will stake the token and basically give the chain observable economic security properties, so that anyone coming through can observe the security properties of the chain and go, hey, X is being staked, economically bonded, and X is a value, and only Y is being moved in of my assets. And as long as Y is less than X, in a very simplistic way, then the system is safe, because the validators will lose X if they want to try and steal Y. And why would they, if we assume they're rational actors? Because Y is less than X.
Excellent. And as someone putting money into the liquidity pool, how much can I, expect to earn? Do you have any sort of estimates on percentages? I mean, are we looking at like 2% annually or 10% annually potentially on your Bitcoin holdings? Do you have any numbers around that yet?
Yeah, so a good example is Uniswap on Ethereum. It was unveiled in November last year, and already it has 20 million staked with about $2 million in daily volume. So I estimate that those who are staking in those pools right now are earning between 20 to 30% annualized on their holdings. And it's purely down to the volume of the trades and the liquidity depth. The team's come up with an algorithm that is slightly different to the way that Uniswap does commissions, and it actually it's more geared towards bootstrapping pools. So instead of paying out a fixed fee, for Uniswap, it's 30 basis points on every trade. The fee paid out is actually proportional to slip. So a rule of thumb for a slip across a pool is if a pool is holding $100,000 in assets in its liquidity depth, and you come in and do $1,000 trade, you can expect that you'll cause a 1% slip. So the rule of thumb is roughly below about 20%, it's roughly 1% to 1%. So $1,000 over $100,000 is 1%. So you're going to get slipped by 1%. And this is a mathematical slip as you push the assets in a direction. But if you came in and did a $10,000 trade on a $100,000 pool, you'll actually you'll actually cause a slip that's a lot higher, 10%. So it means that pools with low liquidity but demand will have the highest fees for those who are staking, which means that stakers should be incentivized to come in and search for these pools. So we don't expect our stakers there'll be some stakers who put assets in and just leave them there for years. And some stakers will come in and they will try and position their assets in the smartest way possible. Do this by observing the market and pushing their assets ahead of time to where they think the demand will be for that pool's liquidity. And they will be staking, withdrawing as they see fit in order to maximize their earnings. And these are good things because when mainnet launch, every movement on chain will actually burn the token. And we'll see the tokenomics, but the teams come up with um, it at a fixed supply asset with of the 1 billion with an initial day zero or mainnet launch of aiming for 50%. So the other 50% will be distributed across other incentives through bootstrapping initial pools, the hard spoons, which we can talk about. But the fixed supply is 1 billion. And each year, as we climb up, as the block rewards are emitted to the validators as incentives for them to secure the chain, the emission is given to the validators. But as we get closer to the 1 billion mark, it starts asymptoting and slowing down. Now, to a point, if you then can graph it in your mind, you will realize that the emissions will go to zero. But if we then burn all the transaction fees, then the supply will constantly come down from 1 billion, which will increase the emissions to the validators. This does two things. Firstly, it ensures that if you own an X% of the total supply, you never get diluted. You can say, I own X% and never expect to be diluted. Two, economic activity on the chain causes a shift of value from those who are using the chain to those who are securing it without diluting people who are holding assets in those pools. So we think this is a smart way. It's come up with a lot of research and discussion with the community over the last 12 months. And we hope that other token projects and token economies model this. So aim for a fixed supply, but also aim for a protocol level burn, which does that automatic shift in value from those who demand the properties of the chain to those who are providing the properties of the chain without diluting people who are in the economy. Yeah.
Very, very cool stuff. Now, you've kind of, I guess, covered quite a bit of what the Rune token actually kind of does there. So I think we'll kind of move on, unless there's any other features you wanted to kind of tell us about from the Rune token.
Yeah. So there's the team mainly use those 3 points. The Rune provides the security of the chain, so validators have to stake it and bond it, and will be slashed if they try and do anything malicious in the chain. Two, it provides the liquidity. And this is really important because if the protocol wishes to connect all assets, so Bitcoin to Monero to Litecoin to Dogecoin or whatever asset that wants to be connected, if you have one-to-one connections, you'll end up having an exponential growth in the number of connections between each asset. But instead, you link them to a single asset, then the graph, the network graph becomes a lot simpler because Dogecoin will be bonded to Rune, Bitcoin will be bonded to Rune. So therefore, you can swap Dogecoin to Bitcoin without actually having a direct link between Dogecoin and Bitcoin, because the protocol will do it an atomic swap, if you will, over 2 pools instead of 1. And this will be completely, the user will be completely oblivious. They will just swap Dogecoin to Bitcoin and not even realize it went through Rune. And yeah, so it's the liquidity. And the last point is part of the governance. So there are some subjective things that will happen to this chain that are unique to what it's trying to do that may not just say like a pure proof of work chain like Bitcoin or Dogecoin or Litecoin as an example, because bridges need to be maintained to external chains, and therefore external events that can't be transmitted on a protocol layer will occur. Like what happens if, say, Bitcoin Cash hard forks, and then there's 2 competing chains on the bridge. Then someone, as in the community, needs to come in and make a decision. Do we nerf one chain and go with the other, etc.? So there's some subjective decision making required. Or what happens when a bridge becomes toxic and security in that bridge? Let's say a small proof of work chain, like one of the small crypto note coins, comes in and someone like a group of people, part of the protocol, needs to come in and make a decision. So the last little point is the Rune will provide governance properties. So those who are bonding Rune in any part of the ecosystem as a validator or in a pool will be able to make an on-chain signal in order to make a decision.
Great. Cool stuff. And yeah, I can imagine there'd be a lot of situations that come in there. Now, I want to talk about the cross-chain bridge. You kind of mentioned it just a little bit, but can you tell us what chains will be the initial focus for you guys? And why do you think that the idea of cross-chain bridges is kind of, I guess, maybe better than atomic swaps? Or how is it kind of similar to than atomic swaps?
Sure. So the Rune is being launched onto Binance Chain because there's a good user base there. There's very similar technology. So the token can achieve good distribution prior to mainnet, which is important in order to spread it out in an ecosystem to prevent Sybil attacks later on. And two, before the mainnet gets launched, the Rune actually needs to have a market value in order for the pools to work. So which achieving those two things by launching on Binance Chain. So the first chain that will be supported as a bridge will be Binance Chain. The second chain will be Bitcoin, and the third will most likely be Ethereum or Monero, because one of the properties of the chain and the validators that will host the chain is that it's permissionless. And the team are aiming for essentially a very pseudo-anonymous launch in a way. The team themselves won't be running any validators. The community will be acquiring Rune in order to be part of the Genesis launch. Validators can run any bridge that they want. So if they want to run a bridge to Zcash or Monero or any other bridge, they will actually earn. They're incentivized because they will earn on exit fees back to that chain. So there's no fees to enter the chain, but there'll be fees to exit. And any validator that's securing that bridge will earn on those exit fees. So they're incentivized to host bridges to chains with high economic activity in order to make a return. And so it's permissionless and it's opt-in and it's pseudo-anonymous. And we think that the bridges that are important are those bridges where the liquidity will be.
Very cool stuff. Now, you guys are also working on a layer 2 network. So you can tell us a little bit about that layer 2 network and how it's kind of, I guess, maybe similar or different from, Lightning on Bitcoin or Plasma over on Ethereum, for example.
Yeah. So one of the problems with, say, a pure Lightning to Lightning connection, say from Bitcoin Lightning to Litecoin Lightning, is there's no way to prove that your recipient has received your invoice. So it sets up what they call an American call option, where the recipient can actually play a game on you and not redeem the invoice if the value is less than what they think it will be. So it's called an American call option. So it's a bit of an Achilles heel to pure Lightning to Lightning swaps. What's actually missing is a protocol level intermediary that has a trustless price feed. Because if there was a node in the middle that knew the price between the two assets, that a market price, a trustless market price, then the node could actually do that asset swap as just part of the conversion. So that's what's missing. So how do we get trustless price feeds? Oracles have issues. Oracles require people and APIs to connect in and insert data into smart contracts, and the way that MakerDAO work is I think they have like 12 oracles that insert the ETH price into the smart contract that has the price oracle, and it settles every 6 hours. What's missing is way for the entire market to run through. We're not talking 12 entities. We're talking thousands of people to come in and set the market price. And the way that works is through the liquidity pools. So if you have two assets, to say, let's just say Bitcoin to Rune, and Rune has a market price through all its pools, and Bitcoin has a market price as well, then the pool will always be reflective of, say, the wider market price out on BitMEX and Binance. Because if it wasn't the correct market price, then someone can come in and either buy cheap Bitcoin or sell Bitcoin at a premium and move it back. So it's permissionless in that anyone can come in through their own economic gain and through instant gratification, move the price back. So anyone who's trying to manipulate that price gets essentially open themselves up to huge amounts of arbitrage. That the longer they're trying to manipulate the price, the more people will come in and they'll be hugely financially exposed. And this is actually more prominent in the bigger pools, the more valuable pools. It's very hard to move the pools in one direction if you're trying to move away from the market price. So this creates a trustless price feed. It's trustless in the way that there's not just 12 entities. There could be 12,000, as many people who are part of the ecosystem, pushing and moving that price around to get it right down to the exact market price, which is the subjective thing anyway. Now, the layer 2 nodes can come in and at a protocol level connect directly to that trustless price feed. And that allows them to perform those channel-to-channel swaps at correct prices that are resistant to manipulation. And now we have an inter-network connection that can do asset swaps instantly at the correct market price. And this actually will let me segue into why bridges and liquidity pools are better than atomic swaps. Atomic swaps, as you know, requires you to do a complex key signing ceremony, essentially, with a counterparty, because you're wishing to swap ownership of a private key, or you're wishing to swap knowledge of a private key that can unlock a certain asset atomically. So basically, you're swapping private keys over in a rudimentary way of explaining it. But it requires, one, a counterparty, and it requires this interactivity, which, if you look through the pathway, takes about 6 to 8 discrete steps between you in this trade. That's a terrible user experience. Compare that with a liquidity pool. There is no counterparty. The pool is your counterparty. The pool is comprised of thousands of different people at different price points and different time horizons staking. You come in, you put your assets in, the pool emits assets straight back. It's all over in a second. There's no interactivity with another entity. There's no counterparty. So we think liquidity pools are much better.
Yeah, there's no screwing around, right? Now, I want to get into talking about your IDO. So this is an initial DEX offering. So this is going to be happening on the Binance chain coming up here very soon. So can you tell us a little bit about what an IDO is and why you chose to do it?
Initial DEX offering is just simply a couple of large sell orders, which is the initial offering up on an exchange. There's no smart contracts. And Binance X have already taken care of all the required technology to perform the asset transfers between two parties. And it also means that the very engaged Binance community, which would be part of the initial bridge and actually part of the initial product, which is Bepswap, which we'll talk about in a second, will be able to access that Rune. And as you can see on the team's proposal on the Binance Community Forum, there's actually huge lockups in place so that the only circulating tokens will be those in the current tier and the initial DEX offering. So it's giving the market time to price the asset in, time for that Rune to be distributed to a much wider user base, so that when the team launch Bepswap in 6 to 8 weeks time, there's going to be a lot of liquidity. There will be an established market price. And it means those runes can go into those liquidity pools alongside some other BEP2 assets and BNB in order to be repriced in, so that the launch of Bepswap won't have huge volatility and fluctuations. It'll be a smooth, liquid, and usable launch so that users can come in and swap their assets, the BEP2 assets, in this liquid, smooth environment. And that's the reason. So that's the timing. The initial DEX offering to allow the Rune to circulate and churn and establish a market price. And then 6 weeks later, the Bepswap launch, which needs that market price and it needs that distribution already ahead of time. So that's the main reasons.
That's cool. So you're bringing decentralized finance to the Binance chain with Bepswap, right? I mean, that's some pretty exciting stuff. I mean, that's going to be basically people being able to, to swap and to stake BEP2 tokens. And that's what, about 6 weeks away, you said?
Yeah, so Bepswap is cool because it uses about half the technology of Thorchain. So it's not, and it's actually a much better user experience for BEP holders because assets actually never leave Binance chain. They move around in pools that sit on Binance chain. And this is only achievable for really 2 bits of magic. First bit of magic is threshold signatures. And the Thorchain validators that will come in and secure this chain, essentially they share signatures around with each other to generate these on-chain addresses that do not have a private key, a single private key. This private key is basically split up between the n number of validators who'll be securing the chain. So it'll be very secure and it's permissionless. And the second bit of magic is Binance chain have, I'm not sure if many people know this, but when you make a transaction on Binance chain, you can actually put in a lot of rich text in the memo field. And that memo field is serving as a bit of a data field to coordinate how the swapping takes place. So it allows state rich state, or not necessarily rich state, but certainly state, I think the BEMO field is limited to 256 bytes. It allows state passed around to instruct the Thorchain validators what the pools are, what the destination address is, and how the swap should take place. So the actual Bepswap sidechain, and there'll actually be a blockchain running on the side based on Cosmos, will sit and it will just observe Binance Chain, and the validators will perform these swaps on Binance Chain itself, if that makes sense. So it'll be secure, it'll be fast because Binance Chain is fast, and it means that BEP token holders don't need to move the tokens anyway. It will just sit on Binance Chain in Trust Wallet or the Ledger Nano S.
Very, very cool stuff. Yeah, it's super exciting. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about with the with Binance in particular. So there's going to be kind of an airdrop sort of thing for BNB and Atom holders, but it's actually a hard spoon. What is this hard spoon thing, and how can people take part in this?
Yeah, so Jaquan, the founder of Tenement and Cosmos, came up with the term. I think it's hilarious. So we're familiar with soft forks. Essentially, it's like a narrowing of the rule set of a chain, and we're familiar with hard forks, which is the opening of the rule set of a chain, which loses backwards compatibility. But a hard spoon is neither. And if you can think of, the lack of a better word, but when you spoon someone, you just simply mimic the shape, the body shape, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So the way a hard spoon works is where the team will be copying over the account state of BNB and Atom token holders, and that state will be part of the Genesis block of Thorchain. Now, it's not really an airdrop, as you will, because there's no movement of assets. BNB and Atom token holders will need to move into the Thorchain ecosystem in order to access those balances that are reserved for them. And the protocol will govern the emission of those assets. It's not going to be all at once. The team will come up with something that makes sense so that there's actually, because the main point is to achieve good distribution to an economy that is valuable to Thorchain as part of the incentive. It's like, what is the value transfer here? The value transfer here is getting valuable people who can be engaged and to provide value to the ecosystem, and bring them onto the ecosystem so that they can choose to become validators, stakers, part of the economy. And that's the point there. So it's not an airdrop because there's no transfer in assets. It's more of a starting point, copying with those account balances. Yeah, and that will happen. There'll be a lot of community discussion about the best way to do this, but expect that for the mainnet launch next year.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And that actually brings me up to my final question here, which is about the roadmap. So can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect from Thorchain for the rest of the year? And obviously we're looking at mainnet next year sometime, but what can we expect from you guys in 2019?
Yeah, so the team are looking forward to this initial DEX offering, so that the Rune has an initial market price and it has a growing user base. And obviously the first most important bit of the roadmap is Bepswap, launching in 6 to 8 weeks. The team's busy signing up launch partners. Launch partners will be pretty important and pretty paramount to the launch of Bepswap, because for the launch to go well for Bepswap, Bepswap needs liquid pools which aren't too volatile, and it needs an engaged user base. And to do that, the team need high quality bet projects to commit for the launch, to put their assets in these pools. And the Thorchain team will actually go out and acquire some more assets off the market in order to bootstrap the initial pools, so that when the Bepswap launches, there's these deeply liquid, usable pools for token holders in the community to engage with. So that's going to happen in 6 to 8 weeks. That's the main focus at the moment, is getting that out. All the key bits of technology have been tested over the last 12 months. And the team's working with the right players in the space to pull it off. The threshold signatures, the side chain based on Cosmos SDK, and the swapping logic, and the research it's been around for 12 months and validated by Uniswap. And then post Bepswap, it will be refining the experience, adding more BEP tokens through to the end of the year, and at the same time building out the first, basically the Thorchain mainnet in 2020, which will have a bridge to Binance Chain and Bitcoin to launch with. So That will happen next year. And then from there, it's probably adding 5 to 6 more chains, high value chains, and expanding the pools, not really focusing on lots of additional features. We think the main proposition of swapping and staking is hugely valuable, and that's what
keep it simple.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough. Anyway.
Yeah. So in 2020, it would just be a string of adding more chains to a point where, towards the end of next year, the team want to have enough developer tooling around and enough of the governance features built in so that the validators, whoever's validated chain at the point, can then go ahead and add their own chains. So if they want to, if a new proof of work chain pops up that needs liquidity or has liquidity, and the validators want to add it because of signals from the community, then they can go ahead, write it without any help from developers and just upgrade the chain to add that bridge. So that's going to be the journey of 2020, to get to a point where the team wants hundreds, potentially, all of the chains connected. And there's no reason why that couldn't be, because adding a bridge doesn't add much burden to Thorchain. It's the nodes run light clients, or they run remote nodes. They don't actually need to run a full node for the external chain, because they're just observing events on that chain and broadcasting transactions out via threshold signatures. And the threshold signatures are actually blockchain agnostic, because threshold signatures refer to the way a private key is generated and not how the chain sends transactions around. So it's blockchain agnostic. So there's not much complexity to adding bridges. It's more of the social coordination, and they are the main problem to solve. And then 2021 and beyond will be the connection. Obviously, the Lightning Network will be a bit more matured. We'll start seeing the Lightning Network on other chains, Litecoin, etc. Zcash have the Bolt network, and Ethereum have also a layer 2 network. We'll see which one pops up. And the team will go ahead and probably in 2021 and beyond, connecting up these layer 2, because layer 2 will allow instant payments across any asset. So imagine you have a single wallet, you have Bitcoin, Litecoin, whatever, but the merchant accepts something else. Well, you can instantly pay, and we're not waiting for pool swaps or anything. You can just basically instantly pay in any currency you want at a market price that's resistant to manipulation to a merchant or another user who knows that they will receive the assets, and then they will not get shortchanged on the swap, and that there's very low fees in between. So that's the long-term vision. The team obviously believe that there's going to be a lot of liquidity sloshing around. There'll be a lot. It's a free market, so there'll be a lot of different protocols and coins. And as we shift more and more of this legacy value that's locked up in property and stocks and commodities, and we shift that into token and tokenize them, more digital assets with value that need good liquidity properties, and that they need these platforms and this infrastructure built so that access to that is democratized around the world. And yeah, that's where we're headed.
That's awesome. A decentralized liquidity. I mean, it's you're kind of removing the gatekeepers and all this fun stuff. It's really exciting what you guys are doing. So for anyone who does want more information about this, again, the link's down below. Go and check out the website, engage with some of the information over there. And if you have any more questions, there's a link for the Telegram group where you can go and ask the community, anything you might want to know else about Thorchain. JP, thank you so much for coming on today.
No problems. It was great to chat, and we're looking forward to answering discussions and questions in the community.
Thank you.
Awesome.